The military helicopter sailed through the skies at a steady pace, its destination somewhere in Southwest Asia, along one of the many points where the legendary Euphrates and Tigris rivers meet. Depending on the outcome, this mission may have changed the course of the SCP Foundation and its activities forever, or it might do nothing at all. Such was often the way when it came to dealing with the unpredictable and the anomalous. Inside the helicopter, Dr. Anton Zarkov was practically rattling with nervous excitement. Ever since he'd been assigned to the 682 termination detail, after years of wasting away in an archival desk job, he'd seen the kind of anomalies you wouldn't believe. 173, that nightmarish statue that snaps the necks of anyone who dared to look away from it. 811, the strange and also strangely adorable swamp woman, whose caustic mucus could reliably melt seemingly any organic matter, save, of course, 682 itself. And Dr. Zarkov was particularly astonished by the aftermath of the epic battle between 096 and 682, which left both of these indestructible monsters horribly maimed. But all of that, it was nothing compared to what they were going to witness today. Dr. Zarkov muttered a prayer to himself in frightened reverence. Dr. Clef, who was sitting across from him in the helicopter, wasn't quite as wound up. Like some action movie cliche made manifest, he sliced chunks from a plump red apple with a Bowie knife and sucked the pieces off the blade. Clef found Zarkov's nervousness little more than amusing. "First time at Site Zero, rookie?" Clef asked between apple slices. Dr. Zarkov nodded, forcing a meek smile. Clef just chuckled. You're wasting your time, you know," Clef said. "Everyone takes a shot at the reptile. I faced it down myself once, mano-a-mano, and during that moment I realized something. As much as it pains me to ever throw in the towel, we're not going to kill this thing. It's just a budget sink." Of course, these kinds of doubts had crossed Dr. Zarkov's mind before. He'd watched countless termination attempts, organized by far more senior researchers than himself, fail and fail embarrassingly. Something about signing your name up for 682 termination was like tying on a blindfold, grabbing a bat, and stepping up to a piñata. Except in this case, the piñata isn't wearing a blindfold, and somehow it can hit you back. It is a one-way ticket to professional humiliation, and if you're unlucky enough to get too close when things go south, it can be so much worse. But Dr. Zarkov well and truly believed that he would be the exception to so much miserable failure. After all, this was an idea nobody had tried before. An announcement over the intercom signaled that they had now entered Site Zero airspace. They'd be landing shortly, and just like that, Dr. Zarkov was all raised hairs and goose flesh once again. It seemed like such a hazy, distant miracle that his project proposal would even get majority approval from the O5 Council. And now he was about to touch down and actually see it. Naturally, Dr. Clef noticed Dr. Zarkov's emotional cues, and like so many playground bullies, decided to seize on it. "Don't buy into the hype," Dr. Clef said. "It's really not that special." The helicopter touched down. Dr. Zarkov felt defensive. He was almost tempted to use hard words, but he realized from Dr. Clef's mischievous smile that perhaps that was always the intention. He certainly had a reputation, if one were to put it in the most neutral terms possible. "But this was your 001 proposal, Dr. Clef," Zarkov countered. "I would have thought you'd be more invested in this." Dr. Clef rose to his feet and sheathed his Bowie knife as the helicopter's side door opened. He gestured for Dr. Zarkov to get up and follow him before saying, "Believe me, even a giant flaming demigod loses its luster when you need to write enough of those stupid reports on it." The two researchers disembarked from the helicopter and walked into the legendary containment facility, Site Zero. One of the most important and secretive containment sites out there, even by the standards of the ever-clandestine SCP Foundation. If ever containment procedures failed here, they'd be staring down the barrel of an unprecedented situation, a Patmos XK Class end-of-the-world scenario. After all, they were dealing with one of the most serious and powerful anomalies they'd ever contained here. Clef and Zarkov entered the control room, filled with huge monitors displaying every kind of recordable metric, but the largest screens were dominated by long-range drone footage of the iconic anomaly they were all there to see. SCP-001, perhaps better known as Uriel. the Gate Guardian. While Dr. Clef remained unfazed, Dr. Zarkov felt a single tear crawling down his cheek. He had never seen an entity so utterly awe-inspiring. An impossibly tall, glowing humanoid entity with 8 great fiery wings and a glowing blade made of pure heavenly fire, every bit as hot as the sun. To think that such an incredible creature existed on the same Earth as him made him feel so incredibly small. The theories as to the creature's true nature were as myriad as they were unknowable. Some of the more devout among the Foundation's ranks even believe that he is a direct servant of the Abrahamic God, guarding the gate to paradise, the Garden of Eden, heaven itself. Dr. Clef just laughed. "Everything you'd hope it'd be, Zarkov," he said. Dr. Zarkov nodded. "And more, Dr. Clef, and more." Even from such a distance, the raw power of the Gate Guardian is impossible to ignore. It radiates off of the being like an invisible aura. Dr. Zarkov had read all the files. To get within a kilometer of the mighty entity would be to court death. Anyone who approached it would taste the heat of its sword, cleave them apart at the atomic level, and effectively erasing them from existence. It's about as dead as anyone could possibly be, save for someone being thrown into SCP-3930 and literally removed from the plane of existence. SCP-3930 had failed to annihilate the hard-to-destroy reptile, but perhaps where that whole lot of nothing had failed, the Gate Guardian would succeed. It remained floating, fixed on one place, as though waiting for something. But what? Perhaps a fateful confrontation with a certain reptilian nightmare, Dr. Zarkov hoped. Like many, he had heard the most famous story involving SCP-001, the Gate Guardian, which took place before even the days of the SCP Foundation. After all, every foundation needs a founder, doesn't it? And that's how it began. The founder was a mysterious figure, no matter who you ask. Some say it was 05-1, others say it was the legendary administrator. Some even believe that it was someone else, someone older, someone who predated even the current O5 council and administrator. A wise and learned figure, going on a pilgrimage around the known world in hopes of expanding their perspective and seeking out the strange and unusual. It was traveling down the river Tigris that the founder encountered the Gate Guardian. Of course, as always, from a mile away. The founder saw the distant glowing point shaped like a human being with wings. It was unlike anything they'd ever borne witness to. That's when the founder felt a door open in the back of their mind, and something sneak in. A single word, projecting somehow infinite authority. Prepare. The very presence of the word made the founder's body rattle. Never had they heard such a voice, conveying such certainty and power. It had to be the voice of the distant glowing figure. It couldn't be anything else, could it? Much like Dr. Zarkov would experience hundreds of years later, the founder, even as a person so powerful, knowledgeable, and influential, suddenly felt so unimaginably small. The founder became aware of not just the extent of the world around them or even the universe, but a terrifying multiverse of possibilities. There was light out there, of course, but even more darkness, and terrifying things were hiding in the dark. Is that what prepare meant? Did it mean to be ready for all the terrible things hiding in the dark, just waiting for the opportunity to strike? Just how great was the extent of the things humanity didn't understand out there? The founder's mind was flooded with so many possibilities. If there was a tide of monsters in the blackness that needed to be fought back, it was too much for any one person to ever handle. The founder needed a group, all gathered around the same mission, to contain the coming threat that the great glowing being had warned them about. People of focus, commitment, and sheer willpower. People who would accept the knowledge of the terrible things in the darkness and still not waver in the face of their great and noble challenge. People who, if necessary, would be willing to die in the dark so that the rest of the human race would live in the light. They would be humanity's greatest defenders, even though they would defend in secret. This was how it had all begun, supposedly. Dr. Zarkov had heard the story whispered many times while conducting his research into SCP-001. And now here he stood, perhaps where the founder had been standing all those years ago. The SCP Foundation had faced down greater threats than SCP-682, the Hanged King, the Sealed King, the Scarlet King, Hell, if they wanted to, they could go toe-to-toe with the Burger King. And all of that had begun with a single word from the mighty Gate Guardian. Surely an ornery, overgrown lizard wouldn't be too much for it to handle. But of course, they hadn't just come here to look at the Gate Guardian. That'd be an egregious waste of time and helicopter fuel. They'd come here transporting precious cargo, a chunk of SCP-682's flesh, cut from the beast itself. Currently, it was attached to yet another remote-controlled drone, set on a collision course for the Gate Guardian. Dr. Zarkov watched the video feeds with sweaty palms as he saw the drone and its diabolical cargo enter the video's view, getting closer to the Gate Guardian by the moment. Closer, closer, until the Gate Guardian struck out with its great and terrible sword. For such an astronomically huge being to move so incredibly fast was astounding in and of itself. But what Dr. Zarkov found even more exciting was the result. In one quick slash of its solar blade, both the drone and the SCP-682 tissue sample were utterly evaporated, gone, reduced to less than even ash. Dr. Zarkov's face split into a manic grin. If it could destroy the tissue sample, then surely it could destroy the monster itself. And what a glorious day that would be. Meanwhile, back at the cross-testing chambers of Site-19, SCP-682 was having another miserable day. It was dragged half-melted out of its acid tank at 3 a.m. in the morning and left slowly regenerating on the floor.
A typical SCP Foundation wake-up call,
it thought to itself, with a roll of its still regenerating eyes. What form of horrible torment would be in store for it this time? It began scrolling through its mental Rolodex for the most recent failed but painful termination attempts. Oh, yes, of course. They tried suffocation via vacuum. That definitely made SCP-682 feel a little lightheaded at least. Until, of course, it adapted its body to begin releasing a gas of similar composition to its native atmosphere, which had certainly given those white-coated wearing sadists a lot to take note about. Then, how could it forget? They tried roasting it to death with extremely high temperatures. Thankfully, as always, it had a trick up its sleeve, adapting a carapace made of solid helium to defend it from the fire, then shattering it to shred a bunch of those buffoons in the orange jumpsuits. Then they'd cut off a sample of its flesh, shoved it into some absurd industrial blender before shoving what's left into a centrifuge. What a divine pleasure it had been for 682 to hear the explosion down the hall, when the antimatter embedded in its genes went off and put a number of those idiotic Foundation drones in the hospital for months. Serves them right to continually meddling in the matters of forces they couldn't even hope to understand. And today, they were feeding at the carcass of a dead cow. SCP-682 sighed. It felt sometimes that the dolts testing it had forgotten the note reading, "highly intelligent," on its file. Being dragged into one of those ghastly chambers and given some form of novel stimulus could only mean one thing. Something stupid and painful was going to happen. Said stupid, painful thing in this case was that the cow was spiked with an instance of SCP-3521, also known as the banana pill, by Dado. What followed was a remarkably absurd instance, even by SCP-682 cross-test standards, where a huge number of bananas spontaneously burst out of 682's body. Being a big fan of bananas, apparently, 682 was actually able to eat and metabolize the bananas faster than the anomalous banana pill, by Dado, could produce them. And because bananas are each individually slightly radioactive, 682 was able to synthesize this collective radiation into a powerful death ray that it used to cause a great deal of death and destruction. As far as Dr. Zarkov and the rest of the SCP Foundation were concerned, this thing being cleaved apart on an atomic level by the Gate Guardian couldn't come soon enough. Sometimes it took the ultimate night to slay the ultimate dragon. Not long after that, SCP-682 was dosed up on enough sedatives to give New York City a week-long nap and carted over to Site-0 on a heavily secured armored convoy. Taking SCP-682 this far between containment sites was considered a matter of grave seriousness. In other words, the result of this little experiment better have been good to justify the insane security risk it took to even get the damn lizard out here. Dr. Zarkov and Dr. Clef decided to co-supervise the cross-test from the safety of the Site-0 observation deck. Either would have been foolish to want to get any closer, Even Dr. Clef, while undeniably a loose cannon, didn't have an outright death wish, unless, of course, wishing death on SCP-682 would count. 682's sedated body was strapped to a large unmanned vehicle, the kind they might use for an exploratory mission on another planet, and sent in the direction of the Gate Guardian's deadly proximal zone. A secondary camera drone was also sent in to lag behind, correctly predicting that when the Gate Guardian struck SCP-682, it would obliterate the unmanned vehicle too, and whatever happened out there, the Foundation needed it on camera. Dr. Zarkov had sweaty palms and gritted teeth, seeing the culmination of his professional career unfold in front of him. Dr. Clef was looking at a meme on his phone. As 682 got closer, it began hearing a booming voice in its head, just like the founder had so long ago. The voice simply said one word over and over, getting louder as the unmanned vehicle brought the two titans closer and closer and closer.
Die.
682, still feeling groggy, thought,
"Oh, if it only were so simple."
And then it happened. SCP-682 entered the dreaded 1-kilometer range. The Guardian slashed down with its mighty sword, creating a brilliant flash of light. In the aftermath, the unmanned vehicle was obliterated, and 682 was left heavily injured on the ground, still trying to process what had just happened. 682 looked up, sobered by the pain, and saw the being that had dealt this blow. 682 began to sneer.
"Is this meant to be the garden?"
It said before breaking into a venomous laugh.
"This is not the garden. The garden is far west of here."
The Gate Guardian struck again with its flaming blade, once again projecting that single word.
Die, 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 die.
When the smoke cleared, 682 was even more horrifically injured, with only one limb left, but still against all odds, alive. It used the one limb to drag itself towards the Gate Guardian, fueled by pure rage and spite.
Die? You command me to die? Oh, wouldn't we all like that? But this is my curse for suggesting the fruit.
The reptile growled. Back at the base, Dr. Zarkov was mortified.
How could it possibly be surviving all this? The sword was meant to cleave apart its victims on an atomic level. Atomic! It's in freaking atoms, goddammit!
Dr. Zarkov wished he had a paper bag to breathe into. Dr. Clef, showing an uncharacteristic degree of compassion, patted Zarkov on the back, saying, "It's okay, buddy, we all remember our first time." Back at the center of the action, the Gate Guardian blasted 682 with its solar blade again. Somehow, despite the terrifying power wielded by the Guardian, 682 continued to live. It was alive, barely, but after 3 strikes from the sword, to be alive with whatever the evil version of a miracle would be.
This is not the garden, and you are not Uriel.
682 roared before spitting at the Gate Guardian.
Pretender.
One more violent strike from the Gate Guardian and 682 finally collapsed, unconscious from the extent of its pain and its injuries. But despite all of Dr. Zarkov's hopes, the Gate Guardian did not strike a killing blow on the unconscious beast. Instead, it transmitted another word, another order, impossible for any human being to ignore.
Remove.
As though in a trance, the workers of Site-0, including Dr. Zarkov and Dr. Clef, entered the forbidden 1-kilometer exclusion zone. The Gate Guardian allowed them safe passage, as they used tools and vehicles to pick up the heavily injured SCP-682 and cart it away from the Gate Guardian's feet. After they all came back to their senses, Dr. Zarkov simply said, "What just happened?" Dr. Clef just shrugged. "I've learned to stop questioning it." Now go check out SCP-001, The Way the World Ends, The Gate Opens, and SCP-682, Ways SCP Foundation Try to Kill Hard to Destroy Reptile, for more madness from the 2 combatants featured in today's epic video.